With every match, a warrior is born. Step inside the ring. This is the Whip Podcast with your host, devastating Daryl Pace and Deshaun Whip Dog Whipple.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders Podcast, aka the Whip Show. You know what it is. I am Deshaun Whip Dog Whipple, and I'm riding the plane solo today. Speaking of planes, I'm gonna talk about that because I was stuck out there in WrestleMania weekend in Dallas, but we'll talk about that later. But guys, we got a great show for you today. But before we go into that, you know what to do. Make sure you go back and check the other episodes. Follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Just put in the Whip Show Podcast. Hit that 5-star, because them ratings help that algorithm thing. You know how it goes. You know how it works. But anyway, enough about that. Speaking of WrestleMania weekend, our guest today, I found out about this gentleman from a post from a certain nation. You understand? This nation was wide open. Yeah, they were almost busted open. From the busted open family. This gentleman was the producer of one of the greatest wrestling podcast shows ever. Busted Open Nation. I want to give it up for Mr. Michael Riker. How you doing today, man?
What's going on? Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Man, thank you very much for coming on the show, dog. Man, so we were just fans, and if you're listening to this or watching it, we were just talking about before we got started, my personal WrestleMania weekend. I had a ball, baby. A lot of karaoke.
I cannot wait to hear the stories. I cannot wait.
Had a ball, man. But I'm gonna tell you this: Spirit Airlines, and I'm putting you out there. It's your fault. It's your fault. I was still stuck in Dallas a whole nother day. Luckily, I have friends out there. I still have fun, man. But damn it, Spirit, you owe me some money, man. I go off on a tangent sometimes. You got to bear with me.
That's okay.
Michael,
you deserve to after what you went through.
Man, listen. Well, speaking of that, and like I said, I actually first saw you in the Busted Open Nation Facebook group, and you made a post about doing the WrestleMania weekend events before. Yeah. Well, first, before we even go into that, man, I want to know a little bit about your background. First of all, I want to know about your wrestling background. Were you always a wrestling fan, or did you become one once you started being a producer of the show?
No, I've always been a wrestling fan. I actually grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
So I grew up a big Mid-South fan, and my favorite all-time wrestler is the Junkyard Dog. The first time I watched the Junkyard Dog, he was in a feud with Michael P.S. Hayes at the time, and Michael P.S. Hayes had blinded him. And at the age of 8, 9 years old, I'm watching this guy who's blind, and he can't see the birth of his baby daughter. So it hooked me right then and there, even at 8, 9 years old. And so they were asking for donations for the Junkyard Dog so he can get this surgery to fix his eyes. And so I sent him $5 out of my piggy bank. So, and my first ever event I saw, my father took me to the New Orleans Superdome. It was JYD versus Michael P.S. Hayes in the cage. Something I'll never forget. I've been hooked ever since.
That's amazing. And it's wild that we actually remember the moment that got us connected, man, to the business. But I'm glad you brought up Mid-South Wrestling, man, because, Michael, how old are you, brother?
I'm 51.
51, okay. Yeah. I'm 41. And it's funny, a lot of the younger fans, they see WrestleMania with 78,000 or whatever. They see these Monday Night Raws do 20,000. I want you to really make these people understand how big Mid-South Wrestling was. This wasn't over 50 people in the audience, man. I want you to kind of convey that to the fans.
Well, just for the, that event I went to in Louisiana Superdome, I believe they drew about 25, 30,000 people to that event. And think about it. That's a regional, organization that was only shown in Louisiana, in Oklahoma, in Arkansas. So, but it grabbed the audience so much, not only with Junkyard Dog, but with all those guys, whether it be, Ted DiBiase, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, just so many other guys. It was so big down there in Louisiana. They actually took a poll. I remember when I was a kid, who is the most famous athlete in Louisiana? And you had Archie Manning, and you had, Pete Maravich, and the number one guy that took over that spot was the Junkyard Dog.
Wow.
So that's how big wrestling was in Louisiana at the time. And every time they went to the Superdome, especially in the early to mid 80s, it was drawing 25 to 30,000 people every single event.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
Now, you talked about it being regional back then and the territories. Were you, because I know a lot of times people weren't even familiar with the other territories because, we didn't have the dirt sheets, we didn't have all the internet and stuff. Were you familiar with some of the other stuff going on, or were you so locked in with Mid-South, you really didn't even care what was going on outside that world?
No, I watched everything, man. I watched, I was lucky enough to have cable, so I had TBS, so I was watching Georgia Championship Wrestling. Back then we had what's called, I don't know if these guys know what this is, but the UHF buttons we used to have, we used to put, a channel 41 and watch World Class. I was into the WWE as well. So I was into everything, but Mid-South was my go-to, man. And that was what really got me into wrestling. Back then, Mid-South I felt like Mid-South was real, and WWE was like, kind of like, entertainment as it is now. But Mid-South to me back then as a kid, it felt real to me. So that's what hooked me. And boy, it was so big at that time. And just so many fond memories of going to shows at Mid-South Wrestling.
Man, that's amazing, man. So with that, I gotta ask you though. You went to these shows. You stated already you're 51 years old.
Yeah.
As we get older, our family tends to look at us like, man, I know you don't still like pro wrestling. Did you ever go through a span in life where you stopped watching it, or did you just keep going? And even in high school, and you.
Yeah, my friends would stray away from it, and I was still into it, man. I never stopped. I never stopped watching. I've never even had a dry period. I mean, of course, there are times where you get frustrated with the product, but not to the point. I have a love affair at wrestling. I just love it so much that, I'll spend my days off watching wrestling. I feel bad for my wife sometimes, but I have so much fun even watching the old stuff and the new stuff. And, I'm one of those guys, Deshaun, that even today, yeah, it's not the same as it used to be, but I still love it. And, I'm a positive person, so I always look at the positives of pro wrestling, and the guys who rip on WWE or rip on AEW. I mean, I love it all, man. It's all good.
Nice. Well, then I got to ask you another question behind that. Did you went to the shows, you watched the shows, you followed all of pro wrestling. All of us here had that dream of wanting to be a part of the business. I actually got to be an independent worker, did a lot of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Did you ever step in the ring?
No, never stepped in the ring. But you know what my goal was, Deshaun, was if you remember, I was a big proponent of those wrestling magazines. So what they would call back in the day, there was, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler. And the guy that was behind all that was Bill Apter. I wanted to be Bill Apter. That's who I wanted to be. I didn't want to get into the ring. I wanted to be the guy who met the wrestlers and reported on everything and did all, I remember as a kid, even like writing down matches I would even like a promoter sometimes, like write matches that I would love to see. But no, the guy I wanted to be was not Junkyard Dog, even though as much as I loved him, the guy I really wanted to be when I grew up was Bill Apter.
And salute to Bill Apter. He's still doing this thing right now.
I know, it's amazing.
He's over there at Sports Keto Wrestling, but he's still, I mean, he's got to be what, 70 at least?
And he's got the energy of a 20-year-old. I mean, and one of the great moments in my life, not to go ahead, but when Busted Open did our first WrestleMania in Miami, I actually got to meet Bill Apter and spend literally 5 hours with them. Went to dinner with them, and one of the nicest guys ever in the business. And it was an absolute honor to sit in the car with them, go over old stories, and go over dinner with them. It was just a tremendous night spending with Bill Apter.
That's so awesome, man.
Yeah.
And I got to say this. Speaking of Bill Apter, I don't know if you heard it. He was actually on Busted Open about 2 months ago, and Bill Apter did a freestyle rap.
That doesn't surprise me.
Man, please. I'm driving in my car, and it definitely popped me, man. Bill Apter did a freestyle rap. I was like, my day is made, man. My day is made.
Bill Apter's up with the times, man. He is beyond cool.
So Max Caster, hey, you ain't got nothing on Billy Boy. I'll tell you that right now, man.
Man, you bring up Max Caster. So here's a funny little story about Max Caster. I actually hired Max Caster to work at Sirius XM. He was one of my supervisors and one of my board ops. And he always told me he was going to be in wrestling, and he was one of my favorite workers to work with. And to see him, on TNT and TBS every week, in the match with Samoa Joe just recently, I can't believe this is the kid I hired, 7-8 years ago, and now he's a big star on AEW. It's incredible. So just what a small world, man. It's incredible seeing him on TV.
I was about to say, how does that make you feel, man? I mean, he told you he was going to do this. You were a fan, and to see him progress the way he has.
It's incredible. I mean, just looking at him, he's a big kid. You can see, he's got the it factor. But it's funny, Max, behind the scenes, very quiet, very shy, very soft-spoken. So when I first saw him on the independent scene, boy, what a change. And he is killing it. And John Cena, I think, even tweeted something about him recently about his raps and stuff. And boy, it just makes me so proud to see what he's been doing in the wrestling business.
For sure, man, for sure. Now, I got to ask you, with your journey, where it took you from there? You were a wrestling fan. What college did you go to? What did you get your degree in? And how did you go into working for other things before you got back into the wrestling world?
Yeah, I'm a journalism major at heart. I always, like I said, I always want to be a magazine writer, a newspaper writer. But unfortunately, I think I had a keen sense knowing that, especially newspaper-wise, that was going to be the big thing going forward. So, unfortunately, I didn't get into the radio business until later on, until almost my early 30s. I was in banking for 10 years, hated it, and decided to quit everything and go to a trade school, learn about radio, learn about TV. And then, I was doing all kinds of jobs, working for news, which I still do now. I actually worked for the New York Yankees for a couple of years. I had all kinds of jobs, worked for Score Phone when you had to pick up the phone and actually get scores over the phone. I actually did that. So I had so many jobs. So yeah, journalism was my first love. Always loved to write, still do. But then I got into radio. I've never left since. I got into radio, I would say in the year 2000, and I've been at it for the last 22 years.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, producing radio, there's so many strong personalities. I mean, I know, because I've done a little radio. People don't even know what goes on behind the scenes. They just see.
Oh God, no.
I'm not. This isn't a shoot thing where I want you to say anything crazy. We don't do that type of show. But I do want to hear what's some of a story that you can tell about some of the backstage stuff being a producer that you had to handle and direct and get in order.
Well, it's funny. As far as Busted Open, I was lucky. I worked with two guys who I liked a lot. So Dave and Doug. Doug Morton was the original host of Busted Open. So those guys, I never really had an issue with. But I've had issues in other areas in sports, especially where guys were the host was yelling at an intern, where I had to literally separate the two of them and actually put the intern into another room so that these guys can cool off. Thank God that never happened on Busted Open. But yeah, that's basically been it. Like you said, there's been a lot of strong personalities. I've worked with everybody from the NFL to the NBA to Major League Baseball. I worked with Christopher Mad Dog Russo. But my as far as Busted Open is concerned, those hosts were always great with me, always awesome. Never really had an issue. We always, like I said, we were friends. So we always have little arguments here and there, but nothing ever outrageous.
Nice. Now, I'm going to tell you, I did some research on you, man. I actually saw one of your posts that you put up not too long ago. It was a shared memory about when they first started Busted Open Radio.
Oh, yes.
Now, first of all, talk to me how you actually got the gig with Busted Open. And then, did you truly believe it was going to end up being what it turned into? What is this, 10, 12 years later? Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I didn't know. I worked with Dave. I worked with Doug Mortman. I actually knew Doug a little bit more. Doug was an operational manager and still is over there. Dave and I would pass to the hall to say hi, but that really was it. He was working on the NFL channel at the time. But me and Doug actually did a fantasy football show, the two of us. He was producer. I was his board op. And, we would have so much fun in there that there were nights where I would bring wrestling tapes to watch as we did the fantasy football show. And he was able to get into the ear of Steve Cohen, who is still the vice president of sports programming there, about getting a wrestling show with Dave. And he actually wanted me to be his producer. And like I said, I was thrilled. I really didn't know Dave that much. And then, but just to backtrack a little bit before that, when I heard some rumblings about that, Dave had a very brief internet wrestling show that was just on the internet. And back then it wasn't even called a podcast. It was just an internet wrestling show. Right. And I was on it maybe one time with him, and me and him clicked right away about our passion for wrestling. So I would say maybe a couple months after that, they asked me to be the producer. And I just thought it was going to be kind of like just a fun thing to do. When we first started, it was literally only 2 days a week for 1 hour from 4 to 5. That was it on Tuesdays and Fridays. And like, to answer your question about, did I ever think it'd be this big? Absolutely not. I mean, it's incredible what's become. I actually just came back from Times Square and actually looked at that billboard that Dave Lagreca put up. It's incredible what's become of that show. I can't be more proud of Dave, more of that show. But no, I just thought it'd be something kind of fun to do at work. Never thought it would amount to anything, just something fun to do. I didn't even think it would last a year. But just the groundswell of guys like you and other Busted Open Nation members and even the wrestlers itself, is just a credit to Dave and Doug and that show, what they did for that show.
That leads up to my next segment. It's called the mark out moment.
Okay.
And the mark out moment is, when you're a worker, sometimes, you're told I have to stay professional. I can't lose. But deep down, you're like, I can't believe I'm sitting in a ring, in a locker room with somebody like Ric Flair or the Junkyard Dog or whatnot. Being a producer of a wrestling show and knowing you're a wrestling fan, name one moment that you're trying to hold it in, but deep down you're like, man, I can't believe he's in the building or we're talking to him and we're like hanging out. What was your mark out moment?
Ooh, man, there were so many. God, it has to be Ric Flair. I mean, I'll give you another one. The other guy, and like I said before, I was more of a journalist type. The big mark out moment for me, especially being a Mid-South fan, was meeting good old JR. That to me was unbelievable because he was the voice of my childhood. So when he first came into the building, I usually don't get nervous around celebrities. He was the one guy I actually got nervous around because he was, like I say, he was the voice of my youth. He was the guy I listened to every Saturday morning. So when he walked into that building, that was the first time I ever got nervous. I met, like I said, Ric Flair was a mark out moment too, but it was more exciting. When I first met Ric Flair, this was more reverence as far as JR is concerned. I met Hulk Hogan, I met, Triple H, I met, John Cena and all those guys, and, great pleasure talking to those guys. But when JR first walked into that building the first time at Sirius XM, that to me was gold.
Man, JR, if you ever hear this, he just sung your praises, man. Right there. JR, I'm going to tag you. He just sung your praises, man. That's so awesome, man. Now, let's talk about the progression of the show. Because again, It started 1 hour, 2 days a week.
Yep.
When it started steamrolling and getting bigger and bigger, like what did you guys actually do you think that made people gravitate to it so strongly? And once it started getting bigger, were you guys like, oh man, it's almost getting too big, or like it's going to change our lives? Like, how did you feel about that?
I think why this show is successful, and even to this day, is that we weren't a kind of dirt sheet show. We were just fans talking about wrestling, about the love of professional wrestling, and putting phone calls through. giving us, what'd you think of Raw last night? Oh, it was like guys talking to guys about wrestling. It was the first wrestling, I had listened to a couple of shows like Wrestling Observer. It was all about the dirt, the rumors. We didn't do any of that. We didn't do any rumors. We didn't do any spoilers, So I think as far as the fans are concerned, it was just a way to talk about wrestling. It was a way to just, talk about wrestling with two guys who were not in the business, who didn't have really any, inside, thoughts about wrestling. It was just their feeling about wrestling. So I think that's why the fans gravitated to it. And then slowly, as we started picking up as far as, getting the good guests and WWE flying us out to Miami and going out there and doing WrestleMania, then you could slowly start seeing, oh my God, this is something different. This is something big. And for me, it was WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. We did a post show after WrestleMania, and we did a show at Walk-Ons on Bourbon Street. They couldn't let anybody else in. The place was packed with all Busted Open fans, and even fans who weren't Busted Open fans but saw, oh my God, there's a wrestling show going on. And that to me, right then and there, I was like, oh, this is changing. We're about to do something really special here.
Man, that's amazing, because I like I said, I went to WrestleMania weekend this time, and I went to the Busted Open party down there in Dallas, and just seeing that many people, the energy, and I mean, not only obviously Mark Henry, Bully Ray,
Sure.
Dave, and all that, but the fans knew each other from calling in, talking on the Facebook page every day. It almost became like a family, a Busted Open. It really was a Busted Open Nation. I think they actually even have a podcast called The Nation's Corner that the Nation does.
Right.
And that's just such an amazing thing, man. So I want to tell you personally, thank you for being a part of putting something like that together. We really do appreciate that, man. And again, I like that you guys are so receptive. I mean, you could tweet Dave, you could tweet those guys, and they'll respond right back. When I first got Sirius Radio on my new vehicle, I'm like, damn, what channel was it on? I forgot. Instantly. Right. Bro, turn to 156, Fight Nation. I mean, this is what he does, man.
Right.
So with that being said.
Yeah, no, and you brought up a great point by Dave. And that's another thing that why the show is so big is because of him.
Yes.
His connection to the fans is he is one. He is a fan. He's not a journalist. He's not an insider. He's a fan. And so to see him, he's always been so gracious with the fans. He's always been, taking pictures, never ever turned down anything. And just to see that over 1,000 people showed up at his roast is just absolutely incredible. I mean, I couldn't be happier for him. I couldn't be prouder for him.
Now, I gotta ask this too, though. When you start something like that, and yes, it did grow into this amazing thing, but did you guys ever initially get pushback from some of the major companies? Like, I don't know if we should let our guys go in there and talk because we don't know if they're going to trash us or whatnot.
Right. Well, WWE's always been an issue. They've always been an issue as far as getting guests on. It's like pulling teeth, to be honest with you. But they're like that with everybody. They're one of those companies that don't like talk to wrestling podcasts or wrestling shows. They like going outside the box. They like going on Jimmy Fallon. They like going on, Hollywood Reporter. They don't like talking to wrestling because, like you said, they don't want anything to come out that's not supposed to come out. So it was always hard. But once we broke through and got in a little bit, boy, I mean, like I said, we talked to Cena, we talked to Triple H. And they listened. And I got word. We had an interview one time. I forget who it was. I think it was with CM Punk, and he emailed us back saying Connecticut was listening. That was the key word. Connecticut was listening. So WWE definitely listens. But they always gave us pushback sometimes a little bit as far as getting guests on. But the other companies, whether it be TNA, Ring of Honor, or other independent shows, no, they welcomed us with open arms.
To go behind that, it's funny. Mark Henry had just said on the show probably about a week or two ago that what made him fall in love with it, he was just driving to another town turned it on his Sirius and heard it and listened to the whole show. Then he called in, and I believe they said they didn't believe it was Mark Henry.
Yeah,
like,
I took that phone call. It was funny about that story is we had Ken Patera as a guest on, and Mark Henry was like, that was Ken Patera. That was Mark Henry's idol, was Ken Patera. So we had Ken Patera on, and Mark Henry wanted to call in to just thank Ken Patera. And as he's calling in, Ken Patera started trashing Mark Henry, started saying that he's not the real strongest man, he's a fake, blah, blah, blah. And so I get back on the phone with Mark Henry, and Mark is devastated. So he's like, listen, I'm not gonna get off the phone, but I want to talk to you guys next week. So I actually booked him for the following week, and he, boy, went off. And it was great radio, and he thanked us for putting him on to retort. And ever since then, he's had a relationship with Busted Open. So I actually felt bad for Mark that day, because he actually called in to talk to his idol, and his idol was trashing him as he was listening. And that we never had Ken Patera back on, because we had so much respect for Mark for what he had done. And it's amazing that he's actually on a host on Busted Open. It's crazy.
Right. Now, I got to ask this then. You talked about that interview, which sounds like it was great radio. I'm going to go back and find that one. But what was, to you, your most memorable interview?
Oh, my God. What a question. There's so many. I always, when someone asks me that, I always harken back. It was right around the time Bret Hart was coming back to WWE. 2011, I believe it was. No, I'm sorry. 2000. What was the Arizona one? 2010. He had just come back, and we were lucky enough to get Shawn Michaels on the air. And the reason that interview was so memorable, we had him on for an hour. And usually these guys would go on for like 10, 15 minutes, and that'd be it. He poured his heart out about Bret, about everything, about how it felt shaking his hand, about how it felt, talking to him, and he actually told us that they had a conversation afterwards and stuff. And remember, he's still with WWE at the time.
Right.
So I didn't even get him through WWE. I got him through he had written a book during that time, and I talked to the publisher to get him on, and we got him on for an hour. And we had such a great time, and was such a great interview that we actually, as a radio show, took out all the breaks, which as a radio show is not good.
I was going to say, man, you're breaking the rules, baby.
Yeah, we broke some rules. Well, when we got back upstairs, we had management up in our faces saying, what the hell are you doing? And the only thing I said to them, I said, you guys aren't wrestling fans, are you? And they're like, no. I was like, this is like having Michael Jordan on the air. I said, would you take a break if Michael Jordan was on the air? And they looked at me, and they didn't say anything. So that interview to me was our greatest interview at the time, because Shawn Michaels, like I said, just poured his heart out about everything from Bret to Mid-South to a World Class to his father to working with Jose Lothario. That interview I wish I had, because that interview was probably one of the best interviews I've ever heard.
Man. You guys heard it. Make sure you check it out. If you can find it, go out there and find it.
I got to ask Dave about that one. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. But I like what you just touched on. You talked about asking the people that were above you, were you wrestling fans? We all know the story about WCW, and it's got sold to Time Warner. And obviously, because they weren't really wrestling guys, that's why they had no problem getting rid of WCW. It wasn't WWE, whatever the people try to say. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Having Sirius really back you, even though they weren't wrestling guys. How did that feel, man? And they'll allow you guys to expand.
Yeah, I mean, those were some tough times, because they didn't get the show. I'll be honest with you, Dave, Doug, and I fought a lot for that show. Fought a lot for getting more days. Fought a lot for getting more hours. Fought a lot for getting just promotion about the show. It was a constant struggle. I don't work there anymore, so I can say this stuff. I don't care. I'm not bashing the company, because they did give us a platform. But it was a constant struggle with them, unfortunately, as far as, getting us to that next level. And I even know to this day, and I'm not saying this because Dave's saying anything to me, I just know that company. I know Dave still has problems with management with that show. But again, like I said, they did give us a platform. They're on the show. They're one of the most popular shows on Sirius XM. So they did do right by us, but it was a constant struggle because they didn't understand the show. You know, they were all about, oh, the NFL's got this, the NBA's got that. You know, we would put up numbers, you know, phone calls especially, that were tripling NFL, tripling NBA, and they couldn't understand it. And I was telling them, this is a popular show. You know, this is not something that's just a fly-by-night thing. This is not something that's going to be on a couple of days a week. People need 5 days a week. And there was this one caller, and I wish I knew his name. He would call up every single day, well, the days that we're on, say 5 days a week. We need 5 days a week. And he would send emails, put up signs in wrestling shows. And finally, when we finally got that 5 days a week, that's when we knew, all right, this show is definitely taking off.
Man, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
God, Jesus. And like you're right, because I'm a Nation member myself. The way we fight for that show, I mean, we really love that. I mean, I don't know, it's just amazing.
No,
man.
I understand. You know, even back then, you know, I remember there was times where, you know, the day after, in fact, WrestleMania 26, I think it was, or 27. No, it was 27, the one in Atlanta. Day after WrestleMania 27, we were, at the time, we were only on the air on the Sirius side. We weren't on the air on the XM side, and we were livid. We were just livid. Like, how can you not put us on XM the day after WrestleMania? That would never happen this day because that show is now so popular. It would never happen. But that's some of the struggles that me, Dave, and Doug went through, just fighting just to get a show on the air after WrestleMania. It was crazy.
And I want to tell you this, and I'm telling all the listeners, viewers, whatnot, it's actually Busted Open's fault that I went to WrestleMania weekend. I mean, obviously I'm a wrestling fan, but, you know, I turned the show on. I started listening to it every day. And you guys brought the energy back to me wanting to follow wrestling. Because, I mean, I had got to the point, 3 hours of Raw, and we're going to touch on that a little bit before you get out of here. That's a lot of wrestling. And it's 3 hours of Raw, a lot of times, is not where it's at. Let's be honest.
Right. Yes, but I agree with you.
Hearing them talk about it and bringing all these guests on, it put a fire back in me. And I said, I've always wanted to go to a WrestleMania weekend outside of where I'm from. I've been there. I became a wrestling fan from WrestleMania 3 in my area. Went to the Pontiac Silverdome, and I went to Ford Field for WrestleMania 23. But it's a different experience when you go out away from where you're from. So it busted open. You're the one that made me spend all that money in Dallas this past weekend, man. Now let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the current product of pro wrestling. What are you a fan? I know you said you like watching everything, but who's your guy?
I'm a Dana Bryan guy, Bryan Danielson. That guy, when that whole WrestleMania 30 storyline just got to me. It also at the time got my son into wrestling. He was 8 at the time, and he was so into Dana Bryan, Bryan Danielson. I keep saying Dana Bryan, but he's the guy. For some reason, I wanted to watch him wrestle, and just to see him, what he's done, and to come back from that injury, it's unbelievable what he's been through. I never thought I would see him wrestle again, and to see him in these matches with Moxley and now teaming up with Moxley and with Regal, it's just unbelievable. So he's a guy, and I met him on a couple of occasions. Couldn't have been a nicer guy, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm such a huge fan of his. He actually took time out of his day one time at Sirius. I took my son one day to meet him, and he spent 15 minutes with my son.
Wow.
Signed everything with them, talked with them, sat down with them, and stuff like that makes you want to become a bigger fan of the guy. So that guy I will always root for, and he's just so amazing in the ring, and just the stuff that he's done in AEW has been incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I actually wish he would have stayed in WWE, but I'm actually glad he did go to AEW. But man, I still don't know if WWE really realized what they had with Daniel Bryan, to be honest.
I agree. When especially when he first came back, I felt like they didn't really use him as well. They having a feud with the Miz, and his first feud after WrestleMania was against Big Cass, and I just never understood why they didn't push him again. And just I think they were always worried about that injury and trying to push him because they pushed him for that championship at 30, he got injured. They pushed him to be Intercontinental Champion after 31, he gets injured. So I just think they were kind of a little gun shy with him.
For sure. Now we also had Cody jump ship, man.
Yeah.
Now a lot of people are still going crazy over that all over the internet. I mean, because we know for some reason fans feel like they have to side with either AEW or WWE for whatever reason. So they're calling Cody Benedict Arnold a traitor, all types of crazy stuff, man. And obviously, most people knew that Cody, people on the inside knew Cody would probably be there at Mania. But how did you feel seeing Cody come out there and they presented him pretty much the same way he was at AEW, which WWE don't do that. They would have called him Big Balls McGee if they could have. But
right. Don't give me any ideas, Deshaun.
You're right. Take that off. Hey, I'm gonna edit that out. I'm gonna edit that out. Anyway. But what did you think about seeing the way they presented Cody and him making that shift to WWE?
Yeah, listen, I was surprised that they had the music and the whole American Nightmare. I was shocked that they had that. I just thought he would come in as Cody Rhodes. I was kind of a little surprised, like Dave said on the air, that he came in as Seth Rollins' opponent. I actually thought it was going to be the Undertaker, just like Dave did. Yeah, it was a little surprising, but what he said on Raw really resonated with me as far as trying to get that title for his father. I think they can really tell an amazing story leading up to what could be a great match between Cody and Roman. I would love to see a slow build coming. As far as, listen, we all would love to see Roman and The Rock next year at WrestleMania. I don't know if that's going to happen. So if it doesn't happen, let's do a slow build between Roman and Cody, where maybe Cody doesn't get screwed out of the title, maybe at SummerSlam, and he has to fight his way, and you feel so bad for him. And then at WrestleMania, it's him and Roman at WrestleMania for the title. I can see that being a big storyline coming here. Will the fans be on board? I'm on board. I don't know if other fans would be, but that promo on Monday Night Raw really resonated with me, Deshaun, because we all had fathers. We all always wanted to do best for our fathers, and I think that's why he went to WWE, because I felt like he's got unfinished business there.
Now, I like that. I like what you said. I agree with it. But do you really think with WWE's creative that they're going to sustain this energy? Because the nostalgia pop is always big, the comeback pop. But like you said, 6 months from now, do we go back to Cody wrestling the same guys over and over in mid-card world?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's going to be it's tough. They don't do long-term booking really a lot, so this could be a rush. I don't think they're taking the title off of Roman right now. So where does Cody fight Roman? Does Cody have to, like I said, go through matches with Seth Rollins, go through matches with Kevin Owens? I'm into that. That's fine, but at the end of the day, I would love to see Cody versus Roman for that title. I think that could bring a lot of juice to that company. Cody was kind of stale in AEW. He was getting booed. We saw it. I don't, like Dave said, I don't know why. Maybe because he was the EVP of that company. I think him and WWE brings him a fresh coat of paint for him. So fans who have not seen him since the Stardust days, maybe now can root for him. Maybe he now can be the face of this company. I'd love to see it, but you're right. You tend to hesitate because a lot of times WWE doesn't really do long-term booking like that. So yeah, I'm a little petrified with what's next for Cody.
So WWE, if you hear this, and I'm gonna be monotone when I talk. I'm gonna bring it down. Please take care of Cody. That's all we ask.
Absolutely.
Just take care of him. That's all. Well, let's jump over to AEW, man.
Yes.
There are people right now that they wave that AEW flag like it is the greatest thing that ever happened to pro wrestling. Where do you stand on AEW? And how big do you think they really can get?
Oh man, that's a great question. I listen. I love AEW. I watched every Wednesday night. I ordered all the pay-per-views. I love it. It's what I like about it is you get a little bit of everything. If you like the car crash, you have car crash matches. If you like the old school wrestling matches, you get that. You have legends there, like Sting, like the Hardys, like Christian. So you get a little bit of everything, and that's what I like about that. There are sometimes, listen, I'm old school. When I think about tag team wrestling, I think about tag team wrestling. So sometimes I see the Bucks, and I'm like, oh, like it's just like, to me, that's not tag team wrestling. And I know I'm in the minority when it comes to that. I'm not saying their matches aren't good, but it's a different style for me. So it's something I still don't get used to sometimes. But listen, AEW right now is the hot thing, and for good reason. I mean, like I said, they're for everybody. But like you said, I don't get I'm an AEW, I hate WWE.
Right.
We should love everything, man. Like, WrestleMania was great over this past weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be just loving wrestling, whether it be AEW, NWA, Ring of Honor, whatever. AEW is great, and I think hopefully one day we get to those days of 98, 97 where we do have a legitimate kind of war on our hands. But I want everybody to succeed. I don't want one company to be put out like it did back in the day for WCW. I want AEW to succeed, but I also want WWE to succeed. It's a different type company. I think the fans who long for the days of the Attitude Era love seeing that. You get the blood, you get the cursing sometimes with AEW. But to me, I love both products. I think both are great. But as far as how big they're going to get, it's I don't know, man. It's tough because this is it's hard to gauge with ratings these days because everybody watches it differently. I watch it, on YouTube. I'll watch it, sometimes the DVR and just fast forward it sometimes if I don't like something. So it's hard to gauge, but AEW is definitely making a mark. It'll be interesting over the next year or two, how much of a dent they're going to put in. Will they ever go on a Monday night? That'll be the key. If they go on a Monday night and start competing with Raw, then things are going to start changing.
See, you brought up ratings, man. We had Russo on the show, and Russo still believes there's nothing. That's it. It's only ratings. I'm like, bro, I get it. That was your thing, but you have to understand people do consume it at different times.
Right. Bishop's the same way. When I listen to his podcast, he's all about ratings. And it's just that ratings are not the number one thing anymore. It's different.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And AEW, like I'm the same way. I love AEW. I'm a big MJF guy. I love him to death. I think he is going to be one of the biggest stars. And I like the fact that he's a true heel. Yes. When there's not a whole lot anymore.
No.
I mean, they go to the meet and greets. He's a true heel. He's got the whole internet going crazy because he'll do an interview and pretty much say he wants to go to WWE. And if you know what a worker does, a worker is supposed to work the fans. Trust me, Tony Khan knows exactly what he's doing when he talking MJF. They're high-fiving in the back, but they're working the fans to believe, like, man, this guy's going rogue. But that's what a heel is supposed to do.
I hate MJF, and you know what? I'm supposed to hate MJF.
Exactly.
I want to see his face get punched in the. I want to see him get punched in the face. So that means he's doing his job. Listen, the Horsemen, Austin, they were cool heels at the time. But I love the old school heels as far as hating him, wanting him to be beaten, paying a ticket to go see him get beat.
Yep.
And that's what MJF brings. And like you said, there's not a lot of them. I think, a guy who doesn't get a lot of credit, who's a great heel to me is Happy Corbin. I think Corbin does a great job as a heel. He gets so much flack on Twitter, and I'm like, guys, that's the idea. He's supposed to be hated. So he's doing his job. I think he is so underrated as a performer that he one of the true heels. But you're right, MJF right now is he's taken to another level with what he's done in AEW.
I literally was just, before I came onto the show, reading some JBL just put out there. JBL said back in the day, remember he had that run as the greatest SmackDown whatever champion?
Right.
He said he went to Vince's office and went off on Vince because they made one JBL t-shirt. He said, I am a heel. I do not want any t-shirts. I do not want a kid in the front row with a JBL t-shirt on. I don't want him with a 10-gallon hat. That's not, you don't get that anymore, man. Everybody wants to be cool. And I understand the merch thing.
Right,
but
of course.
you could expand the wrestling business so much more with a great heel that people want to pay to get beat up.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, guys are more worried, and rightfully so. They're more worried about what's, how much money they can make, and by all means, they should make as much money as they can. But at the end of the day, man, nothing like a true heel. I mean, back in the day, I still hate Michael P.S. Hayes for what he did to the Junkyard Dog. I see him on my TV screen. I'm like, I hate that guy. That's the way it's supposed to be. And it's unfortunate. Kind of the fourth wall has been broken. So you see these guys tweet about their their baby daughters and their wives, and doing this. And I don't want to see that. I want to see them. Like you said, what MJF does is brilliant.
Man, and I'm a huge basketball fan too. And obviously, I'm from Detroit area, so we had the Pistons. Carl
Bad
Malone,
boys.
Yes, Carl Malone elbowed Isaiah 30 years ago. And to this day, if I see Carl Malone, me and that man gonna have a talk. But again, even in that spectrum, like you said, it was something that happened one time, and I still remember it. It was a heel move. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
right.
You're absolutely right, man. Now, before we go to the end of the show, I also have another segment. It's called Book Yourself. I know you said you wanted to be a journalist, and you did that. You produced the show. But let's do some fantasy booking.
Okay.
Let's take, if you could do anything in the business, actually in the business, be whether it be manage a certain wrestler, take a story somewhere, what would you do? Where would Michael Riker book himself in the pro wrestling world in either this era or a past era?
Oh, well, either one. Wow. That is a tough question. Ooh, and I can't be an announcer, huh?
If you can, but if you want to put it over big or something, man.
Oh man, that is rough. Listen, I'm a child of the 80s. I'm a kid of the 80s. I would love to have gone back to the 80s, kind of been like that Gene Okerlund type. Gene Okerlund actually got into the ring with Hulk Hogan one time. I would love to have just been like, a guy that was an announcer, and then all of a sudden, a heel wrestler, kind of like bullies me a little bit. And then a face comes out, like a Hogan or like a Junkyard Dog, kind of saves me. And then we train, and I try getting in the ring and tagging with them. That'd be kind of cool. But just for one match, just to get in and just do like a move here or a move there, and just kind of be like that guy that I always had, that protector, like a Hogan or like I said, or like a JYD, and go against that heel that just bullied me. That would probably be my thing. I never wanted to be a wrestler, but just to be in the ring just for like that tag team, that would have been kind of cool.
Oh man, that's so dope. Hey yo, if y'all got Peacock, there was actually that happened. Me, Gene, and Hogan did the trading thing. Go on Peacock, go on the network, check it out. Me, Gene had the whole Hogan outfit
That's
on.
right,
Man.
Yeah. I guess Mr. Fuji and George Animal Steel. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to have done that.
Man, I do something called the Whip Dog Wrestling Trivia Game, where we bring some different historians on. I'm gonna have to bring you back for that episode, man.
Oh, I love it.
But the questions are up there, but I'm gonna have to bring you back for that episode, man. But I want you to give a little advice out there, whether it be to guys that want to wrestle or even guys that want to get into, because it's a 1,000,013 podcasts, as we know. What would you tell them to kind of separate themselves from the pack in this podcast world?
I would say be different. Yes, everybody has their own wrestling podcast, but be different. Have an angle, whether it be whether you interview people, whether you have a certain subject that you want to talk about. You have podcasts, and that's what I love about Conrad Thompson, is that he has all these podcasts with these different guys, and they're all different. Yep. We started off with Bruce Pritchard, and he talked about a certain event. And then he's got Bischoff talking about the business side of stuff, and he's got Arn Anderson kind of talking about the good old days. So yeah, I would say if you want to start a podcast, even a wrestling podcast, everybody's talking about wrestling, and that's great, but have an angle, be different. It could be anything. It could be, want to talk about old school? You want to talk about today's game? Do you want to have, maybe you should have maybe a partner where you can bounce ideas off of? And also, if the other advice I would say is, if you're going to be in the podcast world, don't think about making money. If it happens, great. But if you're in it to make money, it's not going to happen. You got to do it for fun. You got to have have a lot of fun with it. Be happy, enjoy it, but don't think about making money. If the podcast is going to be good and take off to that next level, you'll make your money.
Man, that's some great advice. And it's funny you're saying that. That's exactly the same advice that they tell a young wrestler. Be different, be different, be different, and wrestle. Everybody's not going to make money. It's too many of us. But
right.
If it's supposed to happen, it will. But if you love it, you'll be fine. But I asked you to I also want some advice too for the wrestlers. Because you watched a lot of wrestling in your 51 years.
Right.
What would you tell a young wrestler listening to this about trying to break out the pack? Probably similar to the same thing, but what else would you tell them?
Learn how to, I'm not a wrestler, but I miss the days of selling. A lot of these guys don't sell, and that's what I hate to bring that back to Young Bucks, but they're guys who don't sell very well. I think they're a little overrated when it comes to that. I love guys so selling, I think, would be number one. Two, make a move mean something. Not every flip you have to do a flip every single time. Sometimes a bison can work just as good as a 450. Also slow it down too. Not everything's got to be a car crash. I like matches that kind of build. A lot of people were kind of down on the Edge AJ Styles match, and I kind of get it, but I love that match only because it was a slow build as far as the match was concerned. I'm not crazy about the storyline, but I like the build of that match. You start off slow and it kind of builds to crescendo. Sometimes these matches go 5-10 minutes and you're like, they put like 50 moves together and it's like, I don't remember what happened. So
nothing registered. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely exactly. Right. So just slow it down. And also tell a story. That's a big thing. I love matches. I love 5-star matches, as Dave Meltzer says, but the matches that really resonate with me is the story of the match. What do we love about, whatever, Hogan and Andre or Austin Rock? Yes, we love the match, but we love the story that led to the match. So you got to tell a good story when it comes to those things.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I didn't want to go here. I didn't want to do it, but I'm going to say it before we go. I'm going to ask you. And I want one. Don't give me 2. Don't give me 3. Don't give me 5.
Got it.
Your favorite match of all time.
I always said it, and Dave hates me for saying it, but I always said it. For some reason, the match that always resonates with me is, and you were at it, Steamboat Savage, WrestleMania 3.
So dope. Nothing more. And fans, listen, I actually had a chance to have a tryout with WWE back when it was Florida Championship Wrestling. Savage versus Steamboat is the match they made us watch in our training session.
Really? Wow.
Yes, that is, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but that is the match. They actually were going to bring Steamboat in to talk, but he was not feeling well that day, so he couldn't make it down to Tampa. But yes, that's the match they made us watch the study. Savage versus Steamboat. So just a little FYI for you guys. So I understand. Very interesting. So before we get out of here, what you got coming up next, man?
Not much, man. Like I said, I work for a news organization right now, so I'm just doing that. I work overnights. I continue to watch wrestling. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Michael Riker 70. Sometimes you'll hear my wrestling thoughts on there. I really don't tweet about anything else besides wrestling on that Twitter page. So if you see me doing that stuff, I'll tweet about WrestleMania. I'll tweet about Raw sometimes. But other than that, just watching a lot of wrestling. I know I'll be speaking to Dave Lagreca later because we talk almost every other Friday. So we haven't talked since WrestleMania. Okay. So I'm interested in seeing what happened and getting behind the scenes little stuff from him. But not much going on. I love wrestling. I can't wait to dive into some of your stuff that on your podcast. I actually watched a little bit of the Duke the Dumpster Drosy stuff. Oh. So I can't wait to dive into your stuff. And but follow me at Michael Riker 70 and get my wrestling thoughts.
Sweet. Now don't leave when the show is over because I need you for 2 seconds.
Yeah, of course.
The very final thing is called Talk Yo Ish. That's where we get 60 seconds. We ring the bell and you can say whatever. Whether you might just want to talk about what you ate today. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But right now, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. You might want to give some advice to the fans, just anything, whatever you want to do. It's your world. You got 60 seconds. Ring the bell.
I'm just gonna talk about Busted Open, man, and just like how much I loved working for that show, and how proud I am of Dave. Just the fact that he's got Bully Ray, Mark Henry, and Tommy Dreamer on that show. And not for nothing, that's where it really took off, was when those three guys came on board. But as much as I love working on that show, I'm so proud of Dave, so proud of what he's become. That show was the best 8 years of my professional life. I wouldn't give up for anything. I mean, we were at WrestleMania in Miami, in New York, in New Orleans, in San Francisco, in Dallas. So many great interviews, so many great guests. Unfortunately, tribute shows. I remember tribute shows when Macho Man died, when Dusty Rhodes passed away, when Piper passed away, and just getting those greats on to talk about them was just unbelievable radio. Going to WrestleCons and going to even like Impact and their events as well. I mean, it was a time of my life, Deshaun, and I wouldn't give it for anything. I will always follow that show. I will always be a Busted Open Nation member, even though I was a proud producer for that show. I will always be a fan. I'll always be a fan of Dave. I'll always be a fan of those guys. And I just love that show so much. And I want to thank you for having me on, because, I will always love talking about Busted Open, no matter what.
That's what's up, man. And we appreciate you for being on the show, man. It's
Thank you.
been amazing. Like I said, hang on for 1 second. We actually have to do a part 2 another time, because it's still a lot of stuff we can talk about, man. But guys, y'all heard it right here. Man, y'all got the inside from one of the Busted Open Nation producers of how great the show is, but actually the mind of a pro wrestling fan, man. You know what it is. Follow him, Instagram, Twitter. He's a great guy, so he has no problem talking back to you. He's dope. He's awesome.
Absolutely.
And you know what to do. Check us out each and every week. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Like I said, all the podcast platforms. Follow us, 5-star us, share it, tweet it out, whatever you do. And check us out next time on the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast, a.k.a. The Whip Show. Take care, guys.